Something was a little different about the weekend Conservative campaign in Ontario. The province's premier was nowhere to be seen, while Alberta's premier was pressing the flesh a few blocks from Doug Ford's home. Well, let's find out what that was all about as Alberta MLAs return to start the fall sitting. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney joins us from the beautiful Alberta legislature. I've spent many hours there, Jason. Premier, what's it say when you're warmly welcomed in Ontario to fight for the Scheer campaign, but Ontario's premier doesn't appear to be there?
Well, Don, in the last Alberta campaign in the spring, I made a commitment to Albertans that I would do whatever I could to defeat Justin Trudeau because of how massively he has damaged our economy and killed jobs in this province. And that's why I kept my commitment by heading east to help out in about 18 campaigns over 23 events. I've also pitched in at a couple of events in New Brunswick. I might be doing a few more, of course, here in Alberta. So I'm doing a little bit to help out. But Doug told me months ago that he was going to stay out of the federal campaign. So we've each chosen our own approach, and I respect different provincial leaders are going to take a different approach on the federal election.
Okay, do you sense or a bit surprised perhaps that the carbon tax doesn't seem to be the ballot box question, certainly not in Ontario, that you would think it might be?
Well, I'm not sure that it is. I spoke against the carbon tax and seemed to get a very strong response. As we know, the top of mind issue in this campaign is affordability, the cost of living. The carbon tax is a huge hit on the ability of people to pay their bills around the kitchen table at the end of the month. It makes everything more expensive. It punishes people, including seniors on fixed incomes, for heating their home. It punishes moms and dads for filling up their gas tank to go to work, the kids to hockey and ballet. So this is a cost killer for many, for all families, and that's why I think the Conservatives are right. We scrapped it here in Alberta. Consistently, 2/3 of people have supported that. I see polling nationally that has majority of Canadians supporting it. So I think that's one of the reasons why the federal Conservatives have been ahead in most polls, because they're responding to that. You know, I know the so-called smart people, all the elite folks who talk down to regular people, say, oh, we have to punish ourselves with this carbon tax. Most people aren't buying it.
It's one thing that's kind of interesting, though, and I don't want to belabor the point about Doug Ford, but he seems to be something Justin Trudeau brings up constantly as sort of demonizing him and saying, don't vote for Andrew Scheer, you get Doug Ford. He doesn't mention Jason Kenney much, and I guess that's because I guess Doug Ford's cuts have already happened and Trudeau can point to them. You got some major spending challenges to deal with. Are you going to be taking a very different approach from Doug Ford into the immediate future?
Well, we're not basing our budget on what other provinces are doing, but the challenge that we're facing. We appointed an expert panel chaired by former NDP Finance Minister, Dr. Janice McKinnon, and some other brilliant folks. And they told us that Alberta has a big spending problem. They said that if we were spending at the same per capita, per person level as Ontario, Quebec, and BC, that we'd be spending $10 billion less. We would have a $7 billion surplus instead of the $3 billion we'd have a $3 billion surplus rather than a $7 billion deficit. So we will have to control spending. We've been clear about that. We were elected on a mandate to do so. We're going to be prudent about it. Don, you were in this building back in 1993 when Ralph Klein cut spending by nearly 20%. It doesn't have to be anything like that if we act now. But if we allow this situation to roll out of control, hit that $100 billion debt the NDP had us on course for, we'll be spending so much on debt interest, then there will have to be deep cuts. So we'd rather do some modest savings now. It won't be easy. There will be some opposition. We will be able to preserve health and education spending. The key thing for us, though, job creation. That's why we need to change the federal government to have one that helps us get pipelines built.
But one thing about Klein, and you're right, I covered that pretty closely, was that he tried to save education and healthcare from getting the hard cuts. There was nurses laid off and that sort of stuff. Are those areas you can preserve without cuts and still get the spending under control?
Yeah, our commitment to Albertans was not to reduce, or either to maintain or increase health and education spending. That's a commitment we will be keeping in our upcoming budget. although there will be savings within those big departments, because they are 2/3 of provincial spending, that we will then reallocate to deal with other cost pressures in health and education. So there will be some changes. Where obviously our systems, like our health system, is 20% more expensive than the average on a per person basis across Canada. We've got to do that more efficiently. We're going to challenge all of our public servants and the unions to help us get more bang for the taxpayer's buck to ensure the future sustainability of those programs.
And of course, lest we forget, a lot of these programs are financed by transfer payments out of Ottawa. Do you think you can work with Trudeau to make sure you get enough healthcare funding transfers and post-secondary funding transfers to preserve the quality you need to build that economy back up on a skilled workforce?
Well, it sounds like you're already calling this election, Don. I'm not prepared to do that. I still think we can get a majority Conservative government here. And I actually think a Conservative minority is looking very possible, if not probable, right now, today. But let me tell you, Don, we will respect whoever gets a mandate from Canadians. We'll have to try to work constructively. But let me tell you, most Albertans think that a Trudeau NDP Green minority will be a nightmare scenario for this province that jeopardizes. We think that the Greens and NDP might force the Trudeau government to walk away from the Trans Mountain expansion that Canadians support by a margin of 2-1, so we will. Let me be clear with you, Don. If we have a Liberal government reelected, we will try to work with them constructively, but we will also at the same time fight without a relent and without apology for our vital economic interests that have been so seriously damaged in the last 4 years.
All right, you're absolutely right. Justin Trudeau is not necessarily going to win this thing. Jason Kenney, I guess I'll ask you again. What are you predicting? You were in Ontario. That's a key battleground, the 905 area code. You're sensing a Conservative can pull this off?
Well, I can predict one thing with relative confidence, that here in Alberta, the Trudeau Liberals are going to be wiped out on election night. I think they'll be lucky to win a single seat. He is the most unpopular prime minister in polling history in this province, more unpopular than his father was at the height of the National Energy Program. I think we're very competitive in Ontario. And I think that with the intensity on the Conservative side and with the constant embarrassments coming from Justin Trudeau, I think there's a real shot for a Conservative majority win.
Okay, Jason Kenney, we'll check in with you after the election and see how that's going for you. Appreciate you taking the time to join us.
And I'm sure you won't make any predictions that you'll regret, Don.
I will not.